Have you ever wanted to invest in real estate but didn't know where to start, how to fund the deals, how to find the deals, how to negotiate them? My name's Grant Cardone. I've been buying real estate for 30 years and have accumulated 7,700 units, have done over $2 billion worth of real estate transactions. I'm going to be doing a webinar that I want you to attend. When you sign up for this webinar, I'm going to give you my home study course, the fundamentals of multifamily, 4 ways to invest in multifamily, the mechanics of the deal, finding the deal, buying the deal, negotiating the deal, how to get the funding for the deal, how to manage the deal, and how to get 4x to 10x returns on your investment. I'll break it down and make it so simple for you, and I guarantee you'll get your first deal in 2020, and it's going to be the steal of your lifetime. And when you sign up, I'll send you my home study course, and you can actually use this so that when we're on the webinar, we can go over it together, okay? Hey, I look forward to seeing you.
Hello and welcome to the 10X Automotive Weekly. My name is Jeff Bounds and I'm the head of automotive with Grant Cardone. And I'm super excited today to have some of the executive leadership team with Podium on the meeting with us today. And who I have Ross Tinkham, and Ross is the director of OEM sales at Podium. And then we also have Steve Shannon, and Steve is a former OEM marketer. And I can tell you there's some robust experience here on this call around automotive, the OEM industry, and the insights that we're going to be sharing with you today are definitely front and center, something that's going to be extremely impactful for everybody to be able to pivot around moving forward. So with that being said, I want you guys to go ahead and introduce yourselves again, give us a little quick bio, and then tell us about Podium.
Sure. So Steve, I'll go first here. So again, hi everyone, Ross Tinkham with Podium. Thanks again for having us here today. I manage our partnerships with the OEMs. So I've been with Podium for about 5 years and have managed our relationships with dealerships, large dealership groups, and I help drive strategy for our automotive vertical. So prior to Podium, I've really just found sort of really nice niche working with fast growing software companies in a variety of different industries.
Excellent. And Steve, go ahead and tell our audience a little bit about your background.
Yeah, sure, Jeff, and great to be with you today. As many of the people on the phone will know that are in dealer land, I wasn't very smart as a kid, so I went into the OEM side of the business. And I spent about 28 years with GM in and around Detroit and a little bit of time in Europe. And then I joined Hyundai, so I was a CMO for Hyundai Motor America here in Southern California for about 4 years. And since leaving there about 5 years ago, I've been doing some kind of consulting work for advertising technology or data science companies that want to understand the auto business better as a way to grow their business. So I got connected with the good folks at Podium back toward the end of last year. And it's funny in one sense that they don't need a lot of help in automotive because with, as Ross will tell you later, with 5,000 some dealers on the platform, they really understand the business. But what I've tried to help them with is looking at it from sort of an enterprise-wide. If you were at an OEM, a lot of these dealer digital tools have enormous value for the individual dealer. But when you step back, they also have significant benefits enterprise-wide or network-wide. So that's kind of where my frame of reference is.
Fantastic. And why don't we go ahead and we got some slides for you guys today. We thought it would be a lot more impactful if we could have some visuals here around this conversation. Again, it's going to be a lot of great content. So for those of you that are not familiar with Podium, I'm going to have Ross and Steve kind of just give us a quick overview of who Podium is, what they do, and the impact that they're making in the automotive industry.
Perfect. And just to make sure, can you see those slides coming through all right, guys?
Absolutely. Looks great.
All right, fantastic. So for those that don't have much of a background on Podium, I'll give you a little bit of our history here. So just over a 5-year-old company, so still very young. Again, as I mentioned, I started sort of right at the beginning about 4 years ago or so. And Podium's inception was really, we have 2 co-founders, and one of our founders' fathers owned a tire shop up in Calgary, Canada. And they had pretty terrible online reviews, and there wasn't really a solution that fit their needs. So that's really where Podium started as a tool that helped dealers or really all types of businesses generate reviews through messaging. Now, since that time, we've really expanded and focused much more on the messaging applications of our platform. So today we call ourselves an interaction management platform. And really what that means is, we help dealers and other types of businesses manage all of their communications to customers through messaging, from again, doing things like generating reviews to, in today's environment, collecting, mobile payments. So We've been growing really quickly. We support about 40,000 businesses across the United States. Our automotive retail vertical is one of our strongest and healthiest. But as we go through the presentation today, we'll actually share a little bit of kind of context or learning from some of the other industries that we support as well.
Yeah, fantastic. And for those of you that aren't aware, here at Cardone Enterprises, not only do we have a big presence in the automotive industry, but we spread across multiple verticals as well. So we're going to also be sharing some information today, not only in automotive, but across various platforms, because it's extremely important. And the content that Ross and Steve are going to be sharing with you today is something that's crucial for you to have as a vehicle inside of your dealership. And then, here at Cardone, Enterprises, we have a very extensive coaching and consulting program that we've rolled out to be able to help you implement it in regards to your sales process and your customer experience. So guys, I think, the biggest thing right now that would be interesting for everybody to hear is let's just talk about the journey in tech in the automotive industry over the past 5 years.
Yeah, there's been a really big shift there. And I think where I'd actually start is just kind of putting that in line with what's changed with consumer behavior as well, because consumers are really what's driving a lot of the changes in technology or processes within dealerships. So if you sort of think about the shift over the past 5 years of consumers we've made to, they've really been spoiled by services like Amazon as being a very obvious one, or Uber. And there's a ton of other companies we could name, but they're really all centered around the customer, right? They're built as these consumer-centric platforms, and what they're meant to do is make our lives really easy or seamless, right? When I need to make a purchase or I need to order a car, it's really meant to make that easy for me. So on the dealership side of things, it's not necessarily about waiting for that next person, obviously, to walk into the store, but building a really strong online presence that really maps to the ways that consumers are searching or engaging with any types of businesses you could really think about here. So if we think about the way that we used to make a purchase as a consumer, it might start with recommendations from friends. If we're talking about purchasing a car, I'm probably visiting a number of dealerships, and then I'm at some point along the way making a decision there. And we know that's changed a lot, right? So if we think about really the impact this has had on dealerships, we're visiting less dealerships when we're making a purchase of a car. We're doing mountains of research before we ever set foot inside of a dealership. And we're probably doing things like engaging with that dealership through things like texting or messaging, much more so than we were 5 years ago or so. So things like consumer reviews are going to come into play, obviously reviews of the vehicle we're considering purchasing. And those are all things that are really going to reinforce, hey, is this a dealership that I actually want to give my business to? And of course, the other options for me to do so. So I think to kind of bring it back to what the technology changes have been inside dealerships, it's really in line with trying to keep up with a lot of these changes, particularly around things like messaging with customers. A website chat lead 5 or 6 years ago may not have really been taken that seriously. Today, especially in the current pandemic environment, has literally been the only way in some cases I could start a conversation with somebody at a dealership when I need my car serviced or when I'm looking to buy a new vehicle. So I think a lot of the change that's been driven is really just kind of on the backs of changing consumer behavior and expectations and trying to keep up along with that.
Yeah, and I think, the really interesting part of that, and like I was mentioning before, we work across many different business platforms. And this has all kind of come full circle now. And you just kind of alluded to it a little bit, Ross. It's, when COVID hit, there's the pre-COVID and then there's the post-COVID, right? So in our current situation now, we've been flooded with phone calls. We've been flooded with, a rise in the amount of messages and, people trying to hit social media, trying to DM, the businesses. And it's just so much activity right now. I think it's kind of caught everybody by surprise. And it is a vicious cycle because of the fact if you make a call and you can't get a hold of anybody, the next step is to look to see if they have a chat on their website. Then you're trying to engage on chat. You don't get anything there. And then they're going to hit social media, and then you're going to end up getting a bad review. So this is so relevant today, and it's a shame that it's been able to get to this point, but this is the reality of where we are. And like you've indicated, Amazon has been the benchmark and continues to be the benchmark of really creating like an omni-channel, way for people to communicate. So yeah, that's fantastic.
Steve, anything you think I missed there?
Yeah, what Granted, to your point about the transition we're seeing right now and probably forever, I often view the first phase of the use of the web for car shopping was primarily about the research part of it, right? You could, with more robust websites, build and price, configuration tools, the cars.com and KBBs and Edmunds, reviews, the transparency into what the price is. You could look at an invoice, right? People learned about what holdback meant. People, that whole part, but the transaction didn't change much, right? And you and I were talking earlier, a lot of those tools existed. I mean, I remember at Hyundai, at one time there was even a thought of moving to digital retailing, and it was potential to white label a set of tools that already existed. So I think what we're seeing now is the tools will get better, but the tools exist. It's more the adoption.
Totally.
Right? It's something that safety now, personal safety requires. People still going to want to test drive cars, right? They're still going to want to come to the dealership, but there's a lot of ways that you can make the transaction now, from just having the web enable the shopping part. How can it really enable the transaction?
Yeah, and the thing about it is that when the dealers adopt this, or whether you're a roofer, whether you're in home services or whatever business that you have, if you can wrap yourself around a solid process, you can increase your sales around it, up to 600%, just by putting the attention on it, just by getting trained on how to communicate in that customer channel. So absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about the growth and over the past, I guess 5 or 6, 7 years and what that's looked like. I mean, there you can see a chart there. I mean, from 2010 to 2011, yeah, obviously a pretty substantial jump. And then obviously 2014 into 18, it's kind of leveled off a little bit, but yeah, definitely some progression there for sure.
And I think just to add to that, I mean, I think it's all really been driven by this, if you really think about it, right? So it doesn't matter what I'm going to buy. It doesn't matter if I'm going to go buy that from a physical business or if I'm going to buy it through an e-commerce transaction. The process has always still started from the phone, right? So think of like near me searches, best oil change near me. Those are things that are literally surging in terms of those are search terms consumers are using, and it's forced dealers and other businesses not to just necessarily optimize their website, but also optimize their GMB, your Google My Business page, right? Because at the end of the day, that's where a lot of people's search kind of gets to. And they might call you from the GMB, or they might click for your driving directions without ever actually clicking through to your website. So I think part of what's kind of forced a lot of this behavior is just the fact that we have our phone on us at all times. And there's really, anything that you need, any sort of research that you're doing is really all being driven by what's currently in your pocket. So
yeah, for sure. And I tell you, the next stat that we're going to share here, and now this is pre-COVID. So for those of you out there that think this has just happened overnight, as you can see there, and they're going to explain to us, 61% increase. So are you prepared? Are you prepared? Do you have a process in place at your dealership or whatever business that you're in to be able to handle the uptick? So guys, go ahead and speak to this a little bit. This is a very interesting stat.
Yeah, so this came from the Small Business Association. And so this is across really all SMBs, right, that they're measuring, where there was a 61% increase, obviously, in website or text message leads since the beginning of 2020. So as you mentioned, like we're talking pre-COVID here, and obviously what's happened in the world has really just accelerated this. I think, to unpack this just a little bit, the challenge here for businesses is that they're really not necessarily ready to receive these types of incoming leads or customers. A lot of small businesses still lean very heavily on things like the phone or email. It's not to say that those aren't a means to communicate with your customers or prospects. I think it's just important to understand that consumers' driving interest to connect with your business has shifted. And again, this stat here, I think really just tells it all. And with what's happened over the past 60 days or so with the pandemic, I think we can all be certain that yes, it's accelerated, but the other piece would be, it's not going to go back to what it was before. If anything, you're going to see numbers like this continue to increase, because once our hand is forced to do these type of things and we learn that behavior, it's kind of hard to unlearn it and go back, go back to the way you were doing business before. So
yeah, for sure. So if you're in the dealership world right now, looking at this, the next natural progression is, what is your strategy? Do you have a strategy? Do you know what good looks like? So we're going to share now, what an online strategy looks like and what you should have in place. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide and discuss that.
Yeah, so I think the concept I'd raise here is something it's been labeled really conversational commerce, which is something sort of in between a fully online transaction and an offline transaction. So if you think about it this way, everyone is jumping to basically stand up a digital retailing solution, which a lot of dealers were really woefully prepared to do, and which, by the way, are not necessarily the easiest lift, right? Like you have to put some muscle behind it and some processes to really make that work. So I think in the short term, my 2 cents on this would be, be prepared to be able to, yes, deliver online transactions to customers, but a lot of what's going to happen over the next, year or two is going to probably be something in the middle of what you're doing today in a fully, a totally online sale. So, obviously as a baseline, you need to have your website optimized. You need to do things like invest in your reviews and your online listings, because those are traffic drivers to your websites. Make sure your obviously inventory is current and updated on your website. But to take it a step further, be available through your website or through these other channels, through things like chat or through messaging. A lot of dealers do this already with your inventory being on Facebook Marketplace, right? That's a new lead source, but it also gives you another channel to monitor. Or again, the GMB now has messaging functionality where I can connect with you without ever hitting your website. However, as a dealer, it gives you another channel to monitor. So I think the piece of advice here would be make sure you're monitoring those channels and take them as seriously as you would an inbound phone call. So yeah, that would be my response to, I think, what is going to happen in the short term before we get to sort of a fully digital, sales process online.
Yeah, and Steve, I'd like you to speak a little to something that I've seen happen recently. Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram has become really aggressive now in making sure their dealers are adopting digital retailing. And where I see this industry going over the next 3 to 5 years is, if you can embrace this communication channel today as a brick and mortar automotive dealership or whatever you're doing out there in the marketplace, you're in danger of becoming obsolete. Because when you are going to, digital retailing, virtual showroom and things of that sort, the level of transparency and the level of engagement is at the highest level. So this becomes more and more important. But just speak briefly into a little bit of what you've seen just in the OEM space and since COVID has hit some of the OEM's direction, moving it future forward with modern retailing.
Yeah, let me give you a couple of examples of things that kind of illustrate problems that are easily fixed that relate to this communication. How often have you gotten a phone call, and there's a feature on your phone where you can click and say, "Sorry, I can't talk now." And how many times is that a landline that can't accept a text?
Not very often.
So every dealership that calls should, and that's one of the features that just a quick comment about Podium is everything comes from one phone number. Every contact comes from one phone number. Let me give you another little example. I had to take a car whose brand shall go nameless to a dealer that shall go nameless. And I went to their web chat, and I was making an appointment to take the car in. And I actually have the transcript here. And it's just interesting because at one point they said, "What's the best phone number and email to reach you?" And I said, "Please just text me on this number. That's the most convenient."
Right.
Well, they came back and said, "Yes, but to finish up," I gave them my number, and then they wanted my email address, so they gave me my email address. So that afternoon, I got multiple phone calls and emails from the dealership, despite through one platform that was to set up an appointment. I said, "Please text me." But then after the service was done, I get another text, and this one was a text, and it asked for a review. And so as an example, this is an example of two different platforms from two different companies, and neither shall go named, and they're both really good companies. But if it's the same dealership, and I tell you I want a text, that's my preference, and you insist on emailing me because people don't look at their emails as often, And I don't know about you, but you don't want phone calls because if the number I don't recognize, I don't answer it, or if I'm at work and then you have the call back and forth. So these are just some little but not so little examples as you try to really sort of bulletproof your whole communication message with consumers. These are all legacy things that you have to fix.
Sure, sure. And then the next question that I think I've asked everybody over the past couple months is, when COVID hit, what was the biggest impact that you were able to see with your customers?
Yeah, so I think there's quite a few. So I'll kind of go through the top of the list. So we have a couple quick slides on this as well. So as I mentioned earlier in the conversation, part of what we do to help dealers is to generate reviews. So right out of the gate, reviews were abruptly, they were not being posted anymore, and nobody really understood exactly what that meant, both in the short term and the long term. But reviews basically were turned off at one point. And the impact to dealers is just a question of, do I continue to actually solicit feedback from my customers if it goes, no place of value for anyone to see, or I myself actually don't even get notified of what the feedback is. The net of this all and how it played out was essentially the reviews are still being hosted within the user's account who left them, and they're now being posted sort of post-COVID. But what Google, I think, was trying to do was protect businesses where they couldn't necessarily look at all the reviews, because they, of course, try to put protections in place for the business. And they didn't necessarily have the bandwidth to do it at that point in time, right? So this was really sort of a measure of protection for dealers. So out of the gate, that was a big piece that changed, and obviously raised a lot of questions. What I would say beyond that, though, and almost more importantly, is that everyone was trying to reinvent how they connected with their customers, right? Like the days of walking into a dealership, again, that faucet basically just turned off. So how do you, from both a sales and service standpoint, offer a quality experience that's also touchless? So almost just as much as, the conversations you're having with the OEMs, where they're very focused on digital retailing and getting as many of their dealers on that as possible, the piece you can't really forget about is service too, which is almost more critical, because even though you're not necessarily moving around, and a lot of us still were, right? My wife is a nurse and still has to go to work. You still have to get your car taken care of. And the last thing that you probably wanted to do was walk in, give somebody your credit card or grab a pen off their desk and, sign whatever the work order was. So there was a really big transition where everyone was trying to scramble to set up this sort of touchless, contactless service experience. So I think everyone was really scrambling to try to understand, we talked a little bit about reviews, but more importantly, how is it that you're managing to this new set of, health expectations and consumer expectations. So that this whole concept of touchless or contactless really was really the biggest change. And the other shift for us, just in terms of what dealers were looking to talk about, it wasn't necessarily about like, hey, I'm really worried about my reviews and my reputation, although that's important. It's more about, how can I immediately connect with my customers and keep the business going?
Yeah, for sure. And I think you had an example in regards to just what I think in the medical industry, what they were able to do with the touchless interactions. You have a slide in there for that, correct?
Yeah, we have a couple of examples here. So again, we were serving a lot of different types of businesses. One of the most impacted businesses, you can't really make any argument against it, was obviously healthcare systems. And anything that you could do to basically mitigate people who might be exposed or sick with COVID to either your own employees or to other patients, is to try to keep everybody out, or at least pre-screen people as much as possible. So this is an example from just an urgent care system, and they basically made the transition where you don't walk in calling us. You're not necessarily always going to get your call answered because we might be busy. But if you text us, or if you connect with us through web chat on our website, we're going to pre-screen you, and we're going to see, are you symptomatic? Are you somebody we should keep out of there? Let's figure out what your symptoms are. And then in most cases, that they basically transitioned to telehealth, which I think, my own doctor, I had an appointment with 6 weeks ago, and it was done over a Zoom meeting, right? So I think that's a really great example, there. From a dealership standpoint or a dealer group standpoint, I think you'd see this pop up on most folks' websites. But basically, if you're entering the website, an immediate notification that says, hey, here is how we are taking care of you and your health. here are the changes we've made, here are our new processes, and basically just using that as a mechanism to say, this is, if you need your car serviced or you need to purchase a car, this is what we're going to be able to do to support those efforts. So again, I think you saw these types of things across all sorts of businesses, but really just a quick change in process, and the ability to manage patients or customers, from further away.
Yeah, and I mean, I think without a doubt, I mean, business operations, especially, in the automotive space, have changed substantially. So let's speak into a little bit what that looks like. What maybe some statistics on what you guys were seeing in the space during this pandemic.
Yeah, so let's talk about sort of the impact on business for a moment. I mean, obviously the data's all out there. We know what happened to new car sales. And beyond that, when we looked at our data set of all the businesses using Podium, we measured across the board a 25% decrease in sales or closed transactions. And we're able to do this because we typically are automatically sending invitations for feedback whenever a transaction is closed. So this was basically the net drop and the correlation we could draw to what happened from a closed transaction or new sales standpoint. However, at the same time, what we also saw was a really large increase in conversations, new inbound conversations through texting or web chat. So again, the number across all verticals was 82%. So really huge growth there. Not surprising, right? If I can't come in and see you, what am I going to do to connect with you? And a lot of this was happening, primarily through the website or through web chat tools. Automotive actually found a steeper increase there. So from mid-April to mid-May, so we're looking at about the past 30 days or so, the average dealer saw an increase of 2x in inbound leads coming to their customers via web chat or through texting or other channels. So business is down. We know that. Things are starting to open back up. We also know that is happening right now. But what's really happening from like a web chat or a text standpoint is the volume of those leads is really rapidly increasing because people are still looking to transact. It's just now happening in a different way.
Yeah. And I mean, look, you got to adopt it. You got to be willing to pivot into this new normal and be able to address it. So, if it's 2x right now, I mean, you got to get a process wrapped around it. You got to get your people trained and kind of going back to what Steve was talking about. The most frustrating thing in the world is when you text somebody or you're in a chat interaction, they need to get the right to ask you for your phone number. And that comes after being able to communicate with you, answer your questions in the way that you want it to be answered, to get the permission to move it to the next level. So I'm a big advocate that, you communicate with an individual the way that they want to be, they want to be communicated. You build that trust, you build that credibility. And then, down the road, you can adapt and say, hey, let's transition this to a phone call. But I think the consumer wants to understand that the business is willing to communicate because, look, at the end of the day, a person could be at work, a person could be in a position where they're not available to talk. And that particular, chat or message format is the way that they can do business and the way they want to do business. So I'm glad you brought that point up because I see it all the time and it just drives me crazy. So I know we're going to share some stuff here around some stats from J.D. Power. So let's dig into that a little bit.
Yeah, so I'll take over here.
Sure.
We wanted to understand what really are, Jeff, you just said it a minute ago, that was great. You want to communicate with people in the way in which they want to communicate. And we all have a bias either about how tech savvy we are or what our preferences are or how old we are may inform that. So we asked J.D. Power, and luckily both in their SSI survey, which is the annual survey of people who bought a car, and in CSI, so in the after sales, the service part of the business, thankfully in those surveys, they ask people the question, how do you prefer to communicate with your dealer? And how did you communicate with your dealer? So we had a great ability to look at what do people want to do? And really importantly, how does it affect their satisfaction? And here's what we found. There is huge value in communicating with people in the way in which they want to communicate, as you said yourself. However, that today is overwhelmingly by texting. And so what J.D. Power was able to do is look at a whole lot of data with two samples. One group of, let's say, Mercedes or Chevy dealers that the consumer purchases of those that texted, and those that got a call, made a call, got an email, etc. And it's overwhelming. We'll show you in a minute just a couple of sort of high-level executive summary. Consumers overwhelmingly want to text. Second key point, unfortunately, dealer delivering on that has woefully underperformed what consumers want. And let me give you one example. We'll look at it in a minute. So for all consumers, about 40% want to text. Dealers deliver that at about 12%. So there's a 3 to 4x difference between here's what I want and here's what I'm getting. So that's one. The second thing is every brand's SSI and CSI is significantly better when you text. And just a couple of examples for the total SSI for, I think, non-premium, it's 10% in sales satisfaction, and it's now 31% in CSIs. So it's a big difference. Another thing is, for some other key pain points for people, the amount of time spent in the dealership, right? If we think about the two main pain points for buying a car, it's the negotiating the price, and it's how much time I spend in the dealership. People that text are in the dealership a shorter amount of time. And one more advantage on the service side is customer loyalty to come back for paid service is higher of those that text. Let's just take a look at a couple of slides and let's go one more. Okay, let's take a look at this one for just a second. And for right now, just look at the bottom part of this chart. So what we have here along the bottom is from Gen Z to pre-boomers and then all auto shoppers. The green bar is the percent who say, I prefer to text, right? So we have a high of Gen Z at 57%, and for all shoppers, it's 34%. The blue bar is the percent to which the dealers actually deliver on that. So that's that 3 to 4x gap between I want it and how many are getting it. And one thing I'll mention, Jeff, literally this morning we were on a call with JD Power. They just updated the 2020 CSI. This is actually 2019, and all of these numbers went up by about 5 points. And that's pre-COVID still. So imagine if we had a sample after COVID. Okay, so that's that gap. You go to the next one, Ross.
So while we're transitioning into this slide,
sure.
I told everybody if you want to increase your sales 600% by leveraging your communication channels, that previous slide was the perfect example of where the area of opportunity is. So you've got to wrap yourself around this. So what I would love to know is everybody that's watching this today, hit us in the chat and let us know, how do you prefer to be communicated with? And it'll be interesting to see everybody out there in the marketplace if they're in agreement with wanting to have those other communication channels. So I'm glad that you shared that, because that essentially tells the whole story right there on the areas of opportunity.
Yeah. Okay, so here's what we did on this next chart, and let's focus now on the top part of the table. So those are for the non-premium brands. Those are the Chevys and Fords and Nissans and Toyotas. And so we have 4 different methods of communicating in the blue boxes, right? One is text. One is the dealership called the customer. The next one is the customer called the dealer. And the fourth one is what I refer to as, I have no idea where my car is. And if you look at that number, 853 is the average CSI score for non-premium brands for those who get a text. Then what we start to do is we get less desired methods of communication that reduce your CSI. So among those that got a call, and that's reasonably polite, right? At least the dealer called me. Right there, the average CSI is 25 points lower. So if I work for a brand that has relatively poor CSI, and I'm spending all kinds of money on mystery shopping and training and spiffs to improve my CSI, if I just text instead of call, that's worth 25 points. If I go the next step to the right, where I had to call the dealership, where's my car? It drops 141 points. I mean, these are remarkable. And as you see at the bottom, it's a little less impactful, but the story is the same in luxury. It really, your CSI is better when you text.
Yeah, and then the way that I like to attribute this data that we're looking at here, I think is going to grab everybody's attention, is how much does it cost you for not hitting your benchmarks in CSI? So we're looking at numbers here on the page, but let's think about this in relation to dollars. And I can, firsthand, trying to find out a status on a vehicle sometimes in the automotive industry with service, it's almost virtually impossible. It's extremely frustrating. It's costing dealers so much money. So this is definitely something that in 2020, it's ridiculous that we're seeing these gaps.
Yeah, Jeff, you mentioned cost. One more thing maybe to mention here is don't forget how expensive a phone call is. We were meeting with a very big dealer group that focuses on luxury brands, and I heard the number $5 to $6 is what they infer the cost of a phone call is. Probably you take a service advisor off the job, he gets on the phone, it's likely no one answers, so he leaves a voicemail, right? Instead of a nice text, hey, Mrs. Smith, your car's ready to be picked up. Okay, next slide, Ross, if we could. Okay, I mentioned earlier in the summary that every brand benefits from this. And the way to read this chart is, first off, we have all the non-Lux brands on the left, and the green bar is the percent to which service customers of those brands said they got texts. So we see Mini, Dodge, Ram at 10%, the average of 7, and some as low as 3. So, but remember, 40% wanted, so it's hard to say anybody's doing that great a job. But here's a critical thing. Here we have data by brand that shows here's how much you can improve your CSI if you are brand X among those customers that prefer a text. So this is, if I'm at an OEM and I'm 12th out of 15 brands, I'm probably getting a lot of oversight by my bosses about what am I do to improve my CSI, and here's one. The next page, we'll look at the premium brands. Situation's very similar. You see Mercedes there doing, quite a bit better job than the average, but still, even their good performance lags the extent to which consumers want this. And you see along the right-hand side the kind of improvement you can make if you're texting with your customers.
Yeah, and I think the next slide that's going to be coming up is extremely powerful.
Yeah.
When speaking into loyalty. So look at these stats.
Yeah, these are, so the teal bar, let's call it, is those who text. So again, that's a sample of people who text. Blue was the dealership who called me, I called them, not informed. And so this is by demo group. The higher intent, so the question is, those that will definitely return for paid service, right? And it's one thing to return for warranty service, of course, right, Jeff, as you know, but paid search is where it's at. And now the numbers aren't hugely different, although they're growing. So in almost look at that boomers, a 7 percentage points. So right, that's an 11 or 12% higher intent to come back for paid service.
Wow, that's powerful stats.
Pretty compelling. And just one more, I think we're going to switch here. The situation's very similar. Okay, this comes from the SSI study. So now we're talking about people that bought a car. Those were service. And the question here was 3 critical parts of the transaction, right? How long did it take you to select the vehicle? How long did it take you to negotiate the deal? And total amount of time spent. And here again, if you look at the teal bar, which is texting, in every case, people spent less time selecting the vehicle, less time negotiating the deal, and a total of less time in the dealership of those that texted, right? Texting just turns out to be, and of course it's a paradox because it's actually quite short and sweet, right? Phone call goes on a long time, emails can get shaggy dog. Text is pretty much, do you have the car in red? Is it available for me to come test drive? Yeah, right? It's a very, almost by nature, a very efficient communication mechanism, both efficient to type out, and people see that as a very efficient way. So I guess a long way of saying something maybe that we all knew and is pretty compelling. And I'll just say again, this is all pre-COVID. So can imagine And imagine if we took this survey tomorrow and even more focused on this,
But I think it's even more relevant that we're talking, pre-COVID, because there's many dealers out there that are going to try to, oh yeah, well, this is not normal. This is something that we don't typically see. So I always go back to one thing: the numbers don't lie. If you don't have a process in place, your people aren't trained, if you don't have a platform like Podium to be able to help you with this, reach out to us, reach out to Podium. You need to get trained and you need to have a vehicle to make this happen. So let's transition into a little bit about how essential it is to create that seamless end-to-end platform experience.
Yeah, I think this loops back around to a lot of what we've been talking about already on the call, which is, there's basically been a pretty big disconnect in how businesses operate and connect with customers, and how we, me and you as peers, interact, right? So if we look at the way that marketers believe, these are the ways customers prefer to communicate. Overwhelmingly still email, overwhelmingly still phone calls, and text being sort of the smallest piece of that. When everything that we've looked at up to this point is basically saying the opposite, like, hey, Mr. Marketer, no, you're actually wrong. What consumers want to do is interact with your business over texting. So there still remains, for whatever reason, a bit of a rift or a divide there in terms of expectations on both sides of the coin.
This is the one that, I mean, guys, if you're looking at this Starbucks piece that comes up here, and this is not grabbing your attention, this is not just Starbucks, but it's obviously a brand that we all probably use, and we've found that it's really convenient to do online ordering or ordering through the app on the phone. And now that we've been able to do this, it's something that we don't want to go away from. So go ahead and speak into this, because this is powerful.
Yeah, so just to give the full context, so there was a webinar that I can source for you folks that was run by Goldman Sachs. It was probably a month ago, if not maybe a little bit more at this point. And the topic at hand was basically what are the long-term impacts or ramifications on the global economy? How is this going to change the economy and how we do business? And so at that point in time, like, things were still ramping up in a lot of places, obviously in the United States, but in some places, some countries like China, they'd already to a certain degree flattened their curve. So this case study was Starbucks within China, which, by the way, consumers in China are very much tech savvy, right? They really adopt messaging almost to a larger degree than the United States, which I just found that fact interesting as well. But what they basically looked at was pre-COVID, Starbucks, a brand that everyone really, for the most part, engages with and knows, 15% of consumers did things like online ordering, mobile payments, et cetera. And during the peak of the pandemic, that shot up to 83%. And after, again, that curve was flattened and things had somewhat settled back down to a new normal, it was still 80%, right, of consumers engaging in that way as they were at the peak of the pandemic with Starbucks. So again, I think this does hit the nail on the head, and we've mentioned this a couple times, which is that whatever the new normal settles back out to be, and however the future looks, we're not going to be going back to doing business as usual. And there's, I think, more of these case studies coming out, which basically say that, hey, as a business, you better be leveraging your mobile interactions with customers, texting and messaging, because everyone's hand was forced. And now this is the new learned behavior that everyone's going to expect from you. So don't try to white knuckle through this. I think, as somebody at an OEM put it to me the other day, there's a lot of dealers white knuckling through what's going on and saying, you know what? Yeah, this isn't good, but hey, we're coming out to the other side of it, and we're going back to business. And that is just, now is really the time to take the opportunity to evolve a bit, because consumers have already gone there.
Yeah, I love that. So in closing out today, I would love for you guys to speak into the audience about what are some practical steps. The data doesn't lie. It's all there. If you're not embracing this, you're missing opportunities. But for the dealerships out there that are willing to adapt and pivot and to put this in play inside of their dealership, what can they do, Ross and Steve, to really make an impact and start gaining market share around this?
Yeah. So Steve, I'll take a first pass at this and then fill in wherever you think I'd leave out. So this actually is not listed as a bullet here, but what I would say sort of first and foremost is that, as I mentioned, I've been with Podium for the past 4 years. So I've had lots of conversations with dealers and dealer groups, and people are kind of very different ends of the spectrum in terms of how they viewed messaging with customers and how important that was to the business. My primary piece of advice would be take texting and messaging as seriously as you take an inbound phone call. And if we just kind of look at the way that texting or messaging has been managed, in a lot of cases, it's been outsourced to a certain degree, right? Like I go and chat with you through your website, but I'm not chatting with you. I'm chatting with somebody at a call center, right? And that's not necessarily a bad business model, but as a customer, it's not really the experience that I want, because I'm trying to talk to you, somebody at the dealership, because I'm trying to buy a car from you. So I would say it's paramount that you look at messaging as critically as you do picking up the phone and answering a phone call, because that is how people really want to communicate with you. And I think, again, there's been a big culture shift there, and obviously that's accelerated a bit. So, practically speaking, what does that mean? I mentioned some of those other channels out there, Facebook or Google. Those are important channels. It's not just your own website, but at the very least, make sure you're giving people the opportunity to text or message you through your website. And primarily it's texting today, right? Static web chat is still a thing, but it's decreasing in its popularity and being replaced by messaging, because once I leave your website, the conversation goes on forever, because now it's on my phone. I don't leave it there on the website.
Right.
We've talked a lot about texting. I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but using that, starting to figure out new ways to leverage texting when you can, in terms of your customer communications. And it's really easy when you talk about, sending information. It gets a little bit trickier when you're talking about, promoting a special to people who haven't opted in to receive that. Obviously, you've got to be cautious there. And that's probably another conversation on how to best approach that. But leverage texting, make sure people can contact you through your website. And again, this whole concept of the touchless experience, especially on the service side. I mean, that is, I don't want to, if I need to get the oil changed in my car, I don't need to walk into your showroom to be able to do that. I don't need to walk into the service drive. I can drop my car off. We can take care of everything over texting, and then you can easily collect the payment from me via text message at the end of that transaction. So, Steve, what do you think I might be missing there? What else would you add to that list?
And in closing, guys, let's just go ahead and stop the share just so everybody can see us here.
Sure.
Sure. Oh, sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry.
We just wanted to hear your thoughts, Steve, on
sure.
ways and how dealers can adapt.
Sure. I would just make one observation, Jeff, and that is that, over time, there have been a lot of things that people might say customers want, right? Or customer expectations are higher, most of which cost money, right? They cost the dealer money, whether we can joke about putting greens or cappuccino machines, or you need this kind of marble on the floor, or free pickup and delivery. It's rare to have the opportunity we have in front of us, that a lot of these new tools are being asked for by customers. They actually lower costs, right? They're more efficient for the dealer, whether it's the ability to trigger something right from an RO, right? Or right from, RDR came and it automatically got triggered, or it's less expensive than a phone call. So you're always looking for the bright side, right? Is there a silver lining here? A lot of the ways in which dealers are going to want to work with consumers actually are more efficient. Now, you have to learn them. You made the point earliest in the beginning. The number one thing is a robust process, right? If it's random, if it relies on people to remember, that's just not going to work. It's got to be a robust process, but it's going to lead to we all hope selling more cars, doing more service work, but it's actually less expensive for the dealer and more prized by consumers. A rare convergence that, boy, we ought to take advantage of as an auto industry.
Yes, fantastic. Go ahead, Ross.
Yeah, I was going to say one other point to mention, which we didn't touch on in this presentation, but I think is actually rather important. People are willing to pay more, right, for convenience and for an easier experience, right? So if you're able to provide that type of frictionless, seamless, I guess, however you want to categorize it, if you're able to give your customers an Amazon-like experience, you're not going to have to necessarily play the price game as much. People are willing to pay for a better experience. So I guess just to kind of put a bow on what Steve mentioned there, there's an opportunity to make more money by just providing a better experience that your customer wants already.
Yeah, for sure. Well, hey, look, I appreciate everything that you guys were able to share today on this. I'm sure that the audience as well finds this very impactful. And I think just, the couple points that I have in closing is, and Ross, you indicated this. It's like, you can't white knuckle it. You can't think this is temporary. You can't think this is going to go away and you're going to go back to the way you've always done things. I mean, in life, you're either growing or you're dying. And the way that you're going to grow is by embracing the technology and by being willing to communicate with people the way that they want to be communicated. And I would strongly recommend that if anybody's interested in this, if they wanted to reach out to you guys, what would be the best way for them to connect with you?
Yeah, I mean, I would say podium.com, right? Depending on what you're looking for and what type of business you are, head to podium.com, head to our website, and there's a number of ways to engage with us from there.
Yeah, for sure. And again, for those of you out there that want to be able to maximize opportunity, you have to know what good looks like. You have to know how to adapt your sales process, and you have to provide a high level of customer experience for your clients. We can help you with that here at Cardone Enterprises. If you want to reach me, it's jeff@grantcardone.com. Also at Jeff Bounds on Instagram. Appreciate your time, Ross and Steve, and I'm sure we'll be talking soon. Thank you.
Jeff, was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
You
Jeff.
ever wanted to invest in real estate but didn't know where to start, how to fund the deals, how to find the deals, how to negotiate them? My name's Grant Cardone. I've been buying real estate for 30 years and have accumulated 7,700 units, have done over $2 billion worth of real estate transactions. I'm going to be doing a webinar that I want you to attend. When you sign up for this webinar, I'm going to give you my home study course, the fundamentals of multifamily, 4 ways to invest in multifamily, the mechanics of the deal, finding the deal, buying the deal, negotiating the deal, how to get the funding for the deal, how to manage the deal, and how to get 4x to 10x returns on your investment. I'll break it down and make it so simple for you, and I guarantee you'll get your first deal in 2020, and it's going to be the steal of your lifetime. And when you sign up, I'll send you my home study course, and you can actually use this so that when we're on the webinar, we can go over it together, okay? Hey, I look forward to seeing you. Have you ever wanted to invest in real estate but didn't know where to start, how to fund the deals, how to find the deals, how to negotiate them? My name's Grant Cardone. I've been buying real estate for 30 years and have accumulated 7,700 units, have done over $2 billion worth of real estate transactions. I'm going to be doing a webinar that I want you to attend. When you sign up for this webinar, I'm going to give you my home study course, the fundamentals of multifamily, 4 ways to invest in multifamily, the mechanics of the deal, finding the deal, buying the deal, negotiating the deal, how to get the funding for the deal, how to manage the deal, and how to get 4x to 10x returns on your investment. I'll break it down and make it so simple for you, and I guarantee you'll get your first deal in 2020, and it's going to be the steal of your lifetime. And when you sign up, I'll send you my home study course, and you can actually use this so that when we're on the webinar, we can go over it together, okay? Hey, I look forward to seeing you.